The visor of the forward holo projector cycled through calibration vectors, filling the bridge of the projection ship Aurora with pale lattices of blue light. Commander Ayla Wren kept her breathing paced to the metronomic flicker. Each pulse meant the Aurora's emitters were 1 micro-arcsecond closer to perfect alignment, and perfection was what the entire holo fleet depended on. In a few hours, the fleet would sail into Phantom Gulf, 50,000 cubic kilometers of ion-soaked nothingness, where mistakes, even the most microscopic, became auroras of ruin. Phantom Gulf had earned its name during the first expansion, when sensor ghosts and electromagnetic echoes lured a dozen freighters to their deaths among hidden asteroid ribbons. Now, a century later, the Gulf was the only navigable corridor between Coalition space and the newly emboldened barony of Asker. Whoever controlled those corridors controlled the trade routes, the fuel depots, and the morale of 3 sectors already exhausted by war. Nasker's Iron Fleet had arrived 6 standard days earlier, staking their claim with real guns and the promise of more pouring in behind them. Coalition High Command had dispatched Admiral Trent Daverick with everything they could scrape together on short notice. 15 combat-ready warships and 5 projection ships, 15 steel hulls against Naskor's 42. 42 mattered because numbers mattered. Battles were often decided before the first rail slug left a barrel. Dvorak's job, therefore, was to change how numbers were perceived. That was where Ayla and the other Ghost Weavers came in. She remembered their final briefing aboard the carrier Resolute. "Our task is not to win outright," the Admiral had said, voice like gravel under a boot heel. "Our task is to delay, to deter, to force Commodore Kel Nyseer to doubt the arithmetic in front of him until Second Fleet arrives from Halcyon. That gives us 8 hours. During those 8 hours, the enemy must believe we are 3 times stronger than we are." Tripling apparent numbers demanded projection ships, slender vessels whose hulls were more lens than armor. They possessed almost no weaponry. Their strength lay in refraction, heat replication, and the ability to scatter coherent light across vacuum, like a stage illusionist scattering mirrors. A projection ship could paint an entire dreadnought, complete with ion bloom and mass signature, into the Gulf. 5 such ships, operating in tight choreography, could paint 30 pairs of teeth where only 10 existed. It was, so far, the only strategic trick that had consistently stalled the Iron Fleet. But the trick had limits. Aurora carried emitter petals as thin as eggshells. Even a glancing hit, a stray micrometeorite, would collapse the lattice and reveal the truth. Worse, Phantom Gulf's unpredictable magnetic eddies threatened to bend light in ways no programmer could anticipate. Ayla's crew was good, damned good, but illusions were delicate. And in war, everything delicate eventually broke. 2 technical translators, in tempo paloris, the countdown to fleet translation reached 0 at 6:10 ship time. Aurora quivered as her jump engines compressed space around her keel, popping them into real space just inside the Gulf's calcified perimeter. Ayla's first act was to pump a test image, a facsimile of the heavy cruiser Dauntless, displaced 15 kilometers off Aurora's port beam. Like so many people who hit critical pauses in life, and displaced 15 kilometers off Aurora's port beam, the Ghost shimmered, then solidified, its hull plates reflecting phantom starlight in perfect mimicry of the original vessel that waited 200 kilometers astern. Green indicators scrolled across Ayla's console. Good. 1 cruiser done, 14 more real ships to hide behind mirrors. Across encrypted narrowband, Admiral Dvorak's gruff voice rolled in. "All projection ships commence full bloom. Combat vessels hold formation Echelon Viper. We let them see what we want them to see, nothing more." Ayla's crew executed the bloom sequence. 1 by 1, duplicates blossomed in the gloom. Guided missile destroyers, torpedo corvettes, even a lumbering assault carrier whose real counterpart was still undergoing repairs back at Perseid Station. Every Phantom carried a carefully tailored sensor signature, a calculated mass, an engineered reactor thrum. Aurora's software layered signals like an orchestra layering sound. To an enemy's scanners, each ghost was indistinguishable from steel. The operation required constant micro-adjustments. Fields in Phantom Gulf twisted radio waves, nibbled at thermal gradients. Chief Technician Lore kept barking updates from the sensor pit. Flux on Channel 8 creeping beyond tolerance, compensating with delta phase inversion standby. Each compensation consumed more power, forcing Aurora's reactors toward the red line. Ayla authorized the draw. The illusion mattered more than longevity. They only needed 8 hours. At 7:44, long-range scopes picked up the Iron Fleet. 42 pings harmonizing into a broad crescent. Commodore Kel Neisser preferred frontal intimidation, like a predator showing all its teeth at once. Coalition tacticians called it the worm smile. Ayla suspected it was more than bravado. Neisser wanted to see fear ripple through his prey, record it, and broadcast it to the Baronese citizenry. Today, if Aurora did her job, there would be no fear to record. The Gulf smirk rolled aside as Nashkaron hulls advanced slug-sided slug throwers bristling with spinal cannons. Coalition-line ships began emitting their own threat profiles. Yet for every authentic reactor burn, 2 more ghost burns mirrored the same cadence. L reported, "Enemy sensors imaging our front. Spectral watch reveals no discrepancies. They're seeing 45 hulls." 45. More than Neisser's 42. A subtle, deliberate choice by Admiral Davrik. Not enough to look suspicious, certainly no overwhelming armada, just a neat numerical edge that hinted at confidence. Minutes later, an open band transmission boomed through every bridge in the Gulf. The Commodore's voice was silk over iron. "This is Kel Neisser of the Iron Fleet. Coalition vessels, you are trespassing in Naskoran municipal space. Power down drives and prepare for boarding. Noncompliance will be met with vaporization." Dvorak responded with a calm dryness that infuriated tyrants. "Admiral Dvorak, Coalition Defense Network. Commodore, your math is off. You are looking at a superior force. Recommend you stand down and await diplomatic channels." Silence followed, a silence that stretched 3 full minutes. During that time, Ayla imagined bridge officers aboard Neisser's flagship poring over sensor feeds, cross-referencing known coalition registries. They would find some surprises. A dreadnought hull number that shouldn't be here, an assault carrier allegedly still in dry dock. When wargamers met anomalies, they hesitated. And hesitation, that was the chink Dvorak wedged open. Phantom Gulf's electromagnetic storms brewed on schedule. At 8:21, a tremor of static raced across local space, cold-frying half a dozen comm channels. The wave also brushed Aurora's emitter petals, warping a quarter of the projection field. On Ayla's board, 3 ghost destroyers flickered, their hulls rippling like candle flames. She stabbed commands into the console, routing extra power through the emitter's stabilizer grid. Hold them, she hissed. Lore growled. "Thermal bleed rising. If we overrun, we'll blow a pedal." "Better a cracked pedal than a blown cover." Power surged, the flicker smoothed. A glance at reactor telemetry showed core temperatures flirting with shutdown thresholds. Ayla logged a silent apology to the engineers who would later scold her for flirting with meltdown. On the wide holotank, Naskaran ships shifted posture, warily adjusting firing solutions. They still hadn't committed to battle. Ayla pictured their analysts noting the ghostly flutter, chalking it up to the Gulf's madness. The bluff held for now. At 9:02, encryption warnings blared. Attempted intrusion into Aurora's emitter control. Someone was probing their software, hunting for packet signatures inconsistent with standard coalition hulls. Lore isolated the attack vector. Origin seems to be external, possibly piggybacking on Naskaran sensor pings. They're not just counting, they're dissecting. Ayla bit her lower lip. Patch in counter noise. Feed them decoy checksum clusters and bounce their pulses through our own hull. Make the data dirtier than a sandstorm. On it. The chess match of illusions continued. each side testing nerve and artifice. Hours dissolved. During brief lulls, Ayla sipped a bulb of lukewarm recaf, letting its bitterness cement her resolve. She had served aboard real gunships before, feeling the thump of missile launches. Here, the battle felt strangely cerebral. Numbers dueling numbers, light dueling light. Yet the stakes were as bloody as any boarding action. If the illusions failed, 15 outgunned coalition ships would face 42. Survivors would be measured in fractions. At 10:37, the Gulf threw its next tantrum. A magnetar pulse washed over the sector, briefly disrupting inertial compensators. On the tactical plot, one of the Phantom cruisers spasmed, its projected nose shearing 90 degrees out of alignment before vanishing entirely. Who shouted, "We lost Lima 3, emitter node 7 offline." In that instant, Aurora's forward bulkhead sprayed sparks. The node's coolant pump had seized, slagging 2 expansion conduits. Chief Engineer Harper scrambled. Damage crews, but repairs would take 40 minutes, an eternity. "We need another ghost to plug the gap," Ayla said. "Can Petrel pick up the pattern?" The projection ship Petrel signaled affirmative. Within seconds, a replacement cruiser shimmered into being, adopting Lima 3's old transponder. Ayla exhaled. Only savvy eyes would notice the cruiser's spatial shift. Did Nascor have such eyes? She braced for missile salvos that never came. The enemy still waited, uncertain if what they'd glimpsed was glitch or trick of the nebula. But not everyone aboard Aurora shared the same loyalty. At 11:02, security alarms howled. Ensign Makel Jorvik, a nondescript systems aide, had accessed emitter code partitions well above his clearance, inserting a viral seed. Marines detained him outside Core Compartment 7. The virus, half-grown, sought to broadcast raw emitter diagnostics over open space, a confession of fraud. Had Jorvik succeeded, Kel Neisser would have received proof that 2/3 of the Coalition fleet was smoke. Ayla joined the Marines at the containment door. Yorick kneeling in flex cuffs, eyes glassy with zeal. "The war's already lost," he muttered. "Better to yield now than burn." She knelt to meet his gaze. "You just tried to write every soul in this fleet into an obituary. Truth saves lives." "Sometimes truth is the fastest way to kill them." She stood, motioning the guards. "Get him to the brig." Back on the bridge, she reviewed the corrupted sectors. Lore estimated 20 minutes to cleanse and reboot. During cleansing, the emitters would stutter like candlelight in a gale. They had perhaps 5 minutes before Nascor noticed. Ayla requested a fleet-wide data shard, distributing emitter load across all projection ships, diluting Aurora's own processing weight. Within minutes, the network recalibrated. Glitches clawed at the edges of every ghost, but collectively the pattern held, as if a gauze lens had briefly slipped over reality and resettled. 11:30. Halfway to the promised 8-hour mark, Admiral Davrick signaled a private channel. The old man's hologram materialized by Ayla's command chair, aglow with scan lines. "I hear you had a saboteur." "Contained," she said. "Emitters stable at 87%, he nodded. "Good. Reinforcement fleet passed Perseus Station ahead of schedule. ETA 4 hours 30, we just need to keep the dance going." "Understood." Davrick's projection lingered. He studied Ayla with grim pride. "Remember, Commander, deception isn't dishonor. It's armor for the weak. Until strength arrives. Tell that to the engineer scraping burn marks off my coolant lines." He offered a ghost of a smile, then dissolved. The next test came sooner than expected. Commodore Neisser broke formation, sending 3 battleships and a screen of corvettes into a probing advance. Their vector angled toward the Phantom dreadnought at grid Echo 7-1 of Aurora's own constructs. If the battleships closed to 2,000 kilometers, their high-resolution lidars would pierce the illusion. "Recommend we posture aggressively," Ayla told Tactical Liaison Cho. "Have Echo 7 power up broadside batteries." "But, Commander, there are no simulated power-ups, Cho. Make the ghost snarl." Cho relayed the commands. Holobanks around Echo 7 flared, imitating plasma capacitors charging. The dreadnought's phantom turrets slewed to target the lead Naskaran battleship. Nicer's probe slowed, then halted. A standoff within a standoff. Laur chuckled. If they get any jumpier, they'll start shooting shadow. We mustn't let them. Ayla studied the plot. Nicer might not open fire, but he could still call Araro's bluff another way, by demanding the dreadnought join a maneuver or broadcast tight beam comm credentials. If the Ghost failed to comply, their cover would evaporate. Ayla whispered to herself. Move along, Commodore, nothing to see. No such luck. A hail pinged. Naskaran fleet to Coalition Dreadnought Valkyrie. Recommend verification code for Coalition Dreadnought Valkyrie. Recommend verification code per Coalition. Dreadnought Valkyrie, recommend verification code for Coalition Dreadnought Valkyrie. Laura looked at Ayla. Valkyrie doesn't exist outside our computers. Send them a redirect, she decided. Claim communications array damaged by magnetar pulse. Request they contact fleet flagship for chain of command clearance. A stalling tactic, nothing more, but sometimes stalling was survival. The gambit bought them 30 precious minutes. Then Cal Nicer made his next move. At 12:26, a lance of laser comm leapt from Nicer's flagship to somewhere behind Coalition lines. A second later, internal sensors screamed. The renegade battleship Requiem 1 of Dvorak's trust probation assets had activated engines without orders, pivoting away from the Coalition formation. Requiem's captain, a defecting sympathizer, opened her gunboards toward the projection ships. She'd seen through the ruse and intended to expose it. Admiral Dvorak reacted with brutal decisiveness. From the flank, the real cruiser Dauntless fired a spread of torpedoes. The warship tore apart. The warship tore apart in silent, incandescent fury. The explosion, real and unmistakable, jolted every hull in the Gulf. Debris rattled Aurora's bow. Ayla felt the deck lurch as inertial dampers compensated. For 10 seconds, nobody spoke. Even enemy channels fell mute, startled by the sudden violence. When voices returned, they brimmed with fresh tension. The Iron Fleet advanced 900 kilometers, adopting attack wedges. Doubt had curdled into anger. Nicer might no longer trust the numbers, but he understood Dvorak's resolve to kill. Here it comes, Ayla murmured. Yet the attack did not fully materialize. Instead of unleashing broadside hell, Nicer's ships settled into oscillating orbits, positioning for simultaneous missile locks while still gauging the threat. They remained outside the 5,000-kilometer envelope where illusions unraveled. The Commodore was hedging, buying time to decide if the gamble favored him. 1,300 hours. The reinforcements were 3 hours out. Aurora's reactors had reached 95% load. All safety overrides bypassed. Laura's complexion matched recycled paper. Commander, we'll have to shed heat. The core's cooking. Begin cycling non-critical systems. Reduce life support locks by 20%. Bridge lights dimmed to a twilight haze. Sweat beaded across brows. The ship became a furnace of whispered prayers. At 13:42, alarms flickered red. Another pulse surge inbound, stronger than any previous. Ayla stared at the waveform, a rolling tidal wall of charge that would stress every emitter beyond tolerance. Abandoning illusions now was impossible. They needed the ghosts more than ever, so she made the most reckless call of her career. Shunt auxiliary capacitors to emitter grid. We ride the surge, amplify it, turn the Gulf itself into our projector. Laura's eyebrows nearly detached. That could fry us alive. Then calibrate damn well so it doesn't. The surge struck. Aurora bucked like a tortured animal. Power screamed through conduits, flooding into emitter pedals. Outside, space blossomed with fever-bright halo. For a fleeting second, every ghost warship magnified tenfold, luminous beyond physics. A constellation of warlike angels glaring at the Iron Fleet. Their false mass signatures spiked, tricking gravitational sensors into believing super dreadnoughts had arrived. Nicer's fleet recoiled. Tactical feeds showed the enemy scrambling ECM, splitting formations. Some captains perhaps convinced a superweapon had detonated. Amid the chaos, Admiral Dvorak seized the initiative. The real destroyer Hammerfall sprinted forward, launching a demonstrative volley of anti-ship missiles. Not a true offensive, merely fireworks to exploit panic. Missiles detonated just shy of enemy shields, white blossoms of plasma. Neisser's corvettes returned wildfire, but without coordination. 15 minutes of turmoil followed. Coalition casualties? 0. Illusion casualties? 8 phantoms shattered by stray shots. Acceptable loss because every shot spent on ghosts conserved the living. By 1410, the Iron Fleet had regrouped, yet their wedge now sat 10,000 kilometers farther back than before. Neisser, weighed down by doubt and the wreckage of Requiem drifting between fleets, opened a private channel to Daverick. The exchange lasted 90 seconds. Official transcripts would later redact most of it, but rumor claimed Neisser demanded proof of strength, and Daverick responded with coordinates. At those coordinates, exactly where Neisser's flagship had been 5 minutes earlier, the Gulf erupted in a staged antimatter burst. Not large enough to endanger, just large enough to remind Neisser that Dvorak had other surprises. The Commodore ordered a full retrograde, 42 ships, reverse thrusters, coasting back toward the Gulf's outer shoals. They hadn't retreated outright, but space widened between the lines, and widening space was precious time until reinforcements came. At 15:56, space-time rippled behind coalition formation. 4 carriers, 8 cruisers, and 30 aerospace wings of the Halcyon Second Fleet thundered out of jump. Their arrival obliterated doubt the way sunrise obliterates shadow. Unlike ghosts, these hulls possessed iron, fuel, resolve. Dvorak raised general broadcast. Nazgoran vessels, be advised, a genuine superior force has entered theater. Stand down, power drives to idle, and submit to inspection. Kel Neisser, whatever grudging respect he bore, recognized the board had flipped. He fired thrusters, pivoting his fleet on withdrawal vectors. Coalition ships, pursued at token distance, enough to shepherd, not to slaughter. War protocols demanded measured deterrence. The enemy, though beaten here, was not exterminated. Only then did Ayla allow herself to collapse into her chair. Reactor load fell as Aurora shut down emitter sequences, petals folding like exhausted wings. One by one, phantom warships faded, their glories evaporating into stardust. Real ships remained, and somehow they were enough. Bridge crews exchanged thin smiles, the kind reserved for survivors who know tomorrow's headlines will not include their names. Low removed his headset, revealing a halo of sweat-flattened hair. Triple numbers with 5 ships. Not a bad show. Ayla managed to chuckle. Let's never do it again. Engineers will riot. He gestured to the coolant scars across the bulkhead. They can bill me. She tapped the intercom. Engineering. Bridge, stand down from red alert. Start calculating safe heat venting. And someone get me a list of every component we burnt out. Command probably wants receipts. A chorus of weary acknowledgments answered. Admiral Daverick appeared on the holotank. Face softer now. Commander Wren, you and your crew performed exemplary service. The Gulf is ours for the present. Prepare Aurora for depot refit. You've earned downtime. Thank you, sir, Ayla said, surprised by how small her voice sounded. Daverick cleared his throat. Your illusions saved thousands today. Never forget that. The hologram winked out. Ayla looked through the forward viewports. Phantom Gulf seemed calmer, its swirling mist tamed by the presence of real and imagined valor. Somewhere beyond, Kel Neisser's fleet nursed wounded pride and revised battle doctrines, lessons written in light and fear. But for this hour, peace held. Aurora glided amid debris and dying echoes, a fragile craft whose weapon was belief. Ayla closed her eyes, hearing the ship's heart slow, the whisper of venting heat. Deception, she thought, was a double-edged art. It required faith every bit as fierce as truth. In Phantom Gulf, that faith had held the line. And as long as it held, 15 ships could masquerade as 45, and warriors armed with mirrors could shape the course of war.